Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the fall season 2023. And tonight we are going to present the game management guidelines. We've got quite a few slides to go through, so I'll go through them pretty quickly. And obviously, if there are questions later on, please feel free to send them to myself or Jamie or Tig, and then we can answer those for you. We have sent out the actual link to the game management guidelines. It's a 10-page document. So there's actually only about 8 pages that covers the game management guidelines. So it's not a lot to go through. It's always a good idea to go through it every season and a few times a season just to remind yourself. Right, let's get going. So we're going to start with breakdown and space and set pieces. So as we've said many, many times, always go out and set your standards from the outset and maintain them. And you do that at the breakdown, you create space, and at set pieces. So often we say to referees, you have those opportunities early in the game to be able to communicate to players what's expected on the day, to both players. So I know in international rugby, we see a lot of advantage played for every single infringement. Just think about opportunities where you can set standards early in all parts of the game. Of course, if you early in the game and you're close to the goal line, feel free to play as much advantage as needed. Right, breakdown, zone, and gate. We've been through this many, many times. This is the gold gate, the blue gate's on that side. Gold is playing up, right? So just remember players' body positions, they've got to come to the gate and in. They can't come in from the side, like in this example over here. They can't come in from the side. So their body's turned, then they can go an angle once they got into the gate. Tackler needs to roll away from the ball. So in this case, if the tackler was trying to roll this way, across the ball, into the ball, it would probably be impacting ball delivery, right? So the tackler needs to move that way. Again, for referees, we talked about this many times. If you have a consistent position at the breakdown all the time at 45 degrees, you get a consistent view of all the tackles. Right. Quickly go through these, all pretty straightforward. Tackler must release, move away. As we said, they've got to roll to the touch lines, all without impacting ball delivery. So as I mentioned, if they roll into the ball or across the ball, we're not going to reward them. Again, if the players are on their feet to play the ball, the defense, the tackler hasn't rolled, we do not want to reward the player on their feet until they make sure the tackler gets out quicker. Don't roll into oncoming opposition or support players. And we also don't want players standing up on the opposition side, interfering with arriving players, right? So they've got to roll as quickly as they can to the sides, towards the touch lines. Once on their feet, they've got to get onside and come through the gate, as we showed you with the gate, right? So the other thing is, especially if there's a breakaway, players moving this way, the team with the ball is going that way, and players that are coming back can't put their arms through the side to play the ball, right? The entire body has got to come from their side and through the gate. Here's a great example of not rolling away and getting up on the opposition side. You can see at this next tackle, the player over here, standing up in the way of the scrum off to really slow down possession. What you also notice in that clip, when they slow down possession, ball slow at the breakdown, often the back lines start creeping up, as they did in this example. This is what we do want to see, player rolling immediately and to the side and not impacting ball delivery.
Offload there, good step around, just about 7 meters
right.
out are the big green.
Player rolled, got out of there immediately, play on. It's exactly what we want to see. The jackler is the first arriving teammate of the tackler at the tackle. The jackler should only be rewarded if they clearly lift or pull the ball up, right? So they've got to get their hands on the ball and they've got to clearly pull it up, right? Just having their hands on the ball is not good enough. They've got to have a good grip on the ball and pull the ball up. And remember, as we said before, we don't want players weight on their hands, especially beyond the ball, and then putting their hands back onto the ball, right? They got to have their weight on their feet, get their hands on the ball, and pull on the ball before they get rewarded. Of course, all of that has to happen, them coming through the gate. Often when the tackle lands at their feet, they're already in the gate, right? And they can play the ball. Jackler has only one chance at the ball, right? If they make an attempt and they don't get their hands on the ball, they can't keep trying once contact has been made with them, right? So arriving players of the teammates of the ball carrier, they can bind on this player, right? They can bind on the player, but they have to have their weight on their feet. And what we don't want is we don't want their shoulders on the player on the ground. If their shoulders on the player on the ground, there can be no contest, right? So if the player goes, instead of binding on, they got their shoulder on the player on the ground, they're already preventing a contest. So you're either going to penalize and get it out of the game, or you're going to manage the player, tell them to keep the weight on their feet, right? But sometimes we feel that it's not material, but the opposition can't contest. So just be aware of that. Bind, shoulders up, all right? So the opposition can actually drive into them. Players at the breakdown, they may shift a defender or tackler and go to ground as long as they make the ball available, right? And if they make the ball available, they also just can't take a player away, go to ground and lie on the ball, right? They got to make the ball available or get out of the way. And this again, what we talked about, must not lean on the ground or on players on the ground, stealing and preventing a contest. Again, with sealing, something get out early in the game. Don't think it's not material, because when you get to the 70th or 75th minute, it could be very material, and that's not the time you want to blow a penalty. You want players to be very aware of what they can and cannot do. And this is something that seems to have calmed down a little bit, but just driving players way beyond the tackle or ruck, more than 1 meter, they must let go of opponents, right? So driving opponents beyond the ruck or tackling them way beyond the ruck is penalizable offense. Space, tackle, ruck, and maul. So clear space is required from the hindmost point at the ruck or maul, including hands on the ground. So especially when you get close to the goal line, they've got their hands on the ground, they've got to be behind the hindmost point of the ruck. If part of the ruck goes into in goal, the goal line is where their hands can be, right? The goal line belongs to in goal, so their hands can be on the goal line, but not beyond it. Remember also, one player on their feet over the ball creates offside lines at the tackle, as you can see in this example, right? And in rucks too, it's if players are on the ground, it's where their bodies are would be the hindmost point, closest to the goal line for either team. Here's a couple of phases where you can see the referees working hard to get at the breakdown. And please take note that the referee is only managing the offside once the ball's secured at the breakdown. So your first job is to make sure that the ball is secured at the breakdown, or if there's a turnover, it's a turnover. Then you manage the offside lines. Don't just go there and manage offside lines without making sure that you're close enough when there's a contest at the breakdown, and that you make sure that the contest is over before you manage the back lines. It's a great example of a few rucks. All right, players are onside. It's a tackle. Referee sees ball secured, then she manages the back lines. Again, 45-degree angle. Manages the back lines. What's really important here is sprinting to the next breakdown and quickly getting into a good angle at the breakdown, managing offsides. It does take a lot of work to be in a good position at every breakdown and be in a consistent position. As we discussed very early on, if you're always at that 45-degree angle, you start getting a consistent view of every breakdown. Right, ball out. The ball's out when there are no bodies over the ball. So imagine from a bird's view, there are no bodies over the ball's considered to be out. If players do ask you, is the ball out? You can say it's out or it's not, but what we don't want to do is start shouting balls out without anyone even having asked you, right? So just make sure that if they ask you the ball's out, and you can just put your arms in the air and say play on, right? Digging for the ball is not out. Hands on the ball or holding the ball when it's on the ground is not out. Lifting the ball clear of the body is out. Scrum off, moving the ball back. They can move the ball back with their foot. If the ball's available to be used, they roll it back with their hands, the ball is considered out, right? So they can only use their foot, use their hands, the ball's considered out. And the scrum off may not hold on the ball and move it without lifting it, right? So a lot of times you see scrum off holding the ball and they move it a little bit. That's considered to be out, but it can also be considered to be a balk, right? So in those situations, you may want to manage it the first time and just tell the scrum off that they can't move the ball, they've just got to play it, or you can free kick it. Prefer that you manage it first. So this is what we want to see, moving the ball back with a foot. And remember, the ball's available to be played. We'll talk about this now, is that you call use it. So when the ball's been clearly one available to be played, you call use it. The player has 5 seconds. Now remember, 5 seconds is quite a long time. And it's also fine to remind the player one more time to use it now, which means you want them to use it immediately, right? If they then don't use it, it's a turnover scrum. At least you're giving them that option where you not only asking them to do it, but you give them another opportunity. But you're not going to do that at every single breakdown. Once you've said use it now, once during downtime, please communicate to that player that when you say use it, they've got 5 seconds to use it and they should use it, right?
Use it, please.
That referee is much nicer. He said, use it, please. Space in front of kicker. So offside players advancing, players in front of the kicker advancing, or players within 10 meters of where the ball lands or played by an opponent. Now, when I'm talking about where the ball lands or is played by an opponent, I'm really talking about offside players. I'm talking about players that are in front of their player that's last kicked the ball, right? What happens is that they reduce options for a counter-attack by taking away space. And I know that it seems like it's a really simple thing to apply, but it's something that the referees always have to take note of. Right? As soon as there's a kick, you know you got your team colors, you tell them to either stop or for players to retreat. So players in front of a teammate who kicks the ball must not move forward. And players within 10 meters have to retreat. So remember, players are retreating. They can be put onside by players that were onside. In this example here, this player was onside, they're moving forward. This player is within 10 meters. They should be moving backwards. They can't just stand there and wait. If they just stand there and wait, they're liable to be penalized. And remember, The penalty here is either a penalty kick where the players were offside, or it's a scrum where the ball was kicked from. You manage offside players if they're outside 10 meters and moving forward. You can either say stop or hold, whatever works best for you. And if they're within 10 meters, you can ask them to retreat or get out of 10. However you feel communication is clearest for you and how players respond to you. Here's an example of plays in front of the kicker. So just take note of the players in white here. The player in white kicks it there and everybody moves up, right? So they're all offside. They immediately turn, they're moving forward, they're offside, right? Now, if you give them the option, the penalty would be like halfway between the goal line and the 22 where they were offside, or this would be a 5-meter scrum they kicked from. Set pieces, scrum, 5-meter offside lines. And also please know the scrum off onside law. We will talk about that a bit more. Line out is 10 meters and the opposition hooker and receivers have to be in position, right? If they're going to have a receiver, they've got to be 2 meters. There's always got to be a hooker that's 2 meters away from the line out. Always manage offside lines until the line out is over. Now, I know you see everybody on TV at the line outs with their arms out like this. You know, I don't know how it actually works because you can't look at both teams. So what we normally prefer is that you're on the throwing in side, either the front or the back. You can hold your arm up for players to stay back, you know, the defense. And then when the line out's over, your arm comes down. Remember, for more, if the ball is away from the line of touch, the line is over, unless there's a maul that formed, then all the feet got to move away from the line of touch before the line out's over. Notice that a lot of referees just say line out over as quickly as they can. So here's the scrum. If the opposition scrum off takes up a position next to the player throwing in, they can then move back to the hindmost point and they can move either way. Remember, everybody else that's not involved in the scrum got to be 5 meters. And if the scrum moves, they've got to move, right? Remember the offside line for scrum offs, the scrum off putting the ball in. The ball is the offside line, so they can be on the ball, but the defensive scrum has got to be on their side of the ball. And then one last thing is if the defensive scrum off is following the ball, we do not want them to climb into the pocket over here, right? They've got to imagine that this is an oval and they can only go around it. And they've got to stay on their side of the ball. I was a bit quick on the draw there. So goal line dropout. I know this has been a lot of fun for everybody. Plays restarted with a goal line dropout when a player carrying the ball is held up in goal, so that the player cannot ground or play the ball. Any player carrying the ball is held up in goal, so that the player cannot ground or play the ball, right? An attacking kick, other than a kickoff, restart kick, drop goal, or penalty kick at goal, is grounded or made dead by the defending team in the end goal. An attacking player knocks on in the opponent's end goal. The ball is put into end goal by an attacking player and a defender makes it dead. A kickoff or restart goes into end goal and a defending player plays the ball and does not make it dead immediately. In other words, if they play the ball, they run with it, they stand there, hold the ball, wait for someone to come close to them, it means that they've played the ball, it didn't immediately make it dead, right? It's also going to be a goal line dropout. Now, 22-meter dropout, an unsuccessful penalty kick at goal or an attempted drop goal is kicked through end goal or goes into end goal and is made dead, right? Which is pretty straightforward. And a kick in general play or a penalty or free kick is kicked dead through end goal and the opposition chooses a dropout. Pretty straightforward. Scrum. Don't know why that red circle is there, but we'll just move on through it. Scrum safety is always the highest priority. And when we talk about safety, we want to make sure that we set up the scrums properly. But if the scrum collapses, please just stop the game, right? If the scrum collapses, rather restart or penalize if there was any illegal play that you've identified. If a player is pushed off their feet, it's also illegal and you've got to penalize and stop that. You can't start playing advantage when a player is pushed off their feet, off the ground, right? Or if the scrums collapse, you don't really want to play advantage, right? So safety is your main priority. Blow your whistle. Start again or penalize. So at the scrum, make a mark, each hooker's right foot to be left of the mark. I'll show you an illustration in a short while. And the hooker has got to have a break foot in place, right, until the set. And the break foot, they got to have 1 foot forward. As you can see in this example, they've got to have 1 foot forward until they're called engaged, right? Just make sure that that's in place and make sure that you are always aware of it and you're always looking for it. Stabilizes the scrum. So scrum setup, the referee must control the engagement process, right? 3 calls should result in 3 actions. Talked earlier about the players. If you take a center line here and they have their right foot left of the mark, the player in gold and the player in red, they have their right foot left of the mark. It means that you helps with the interlocking, right? So 3 calls should result in 3 actions. Stability is essential at each step of the process. Visually check the alignment at every step. So if you go, say crouching, to just make sure that at every single moment that you're just not allowing them to just keep pushing through, right? If it's not right, rather restart than just go ahead with it because you want to get the scrum over. Rather just restart low, let them start again, explain to them what you want to need, what you need. It's always a good idea to manage one player at a time. As soon as you start talking to both props, they probably have a pretty good idea that you might not know exactly who the culprit is. So work with one prop first, and if that's resolved, then you can look at the other prop. And if you visually check the alignment at every step, it automatically will allow you to maintain a good cadence and you're not rushing. During the scrum. So dominance. We always talk about we want to reward dominance, but both props must initially push forward together, right? So we're not looking at this or looking at that. We want both props to initially push forward together. And that's when we reward dominance, right? And when the scrum is stationary, the ball has been available to be played for 3 to 5 seconds, the referee should call use it. Now, often us as referees, suddenly the ball's at the back, we just rush, use it because we just want to get the ball out. The ball has to be available for 3 to 5 seconds before you can call use it. Try not to take an advantage away from a dominant team. Here's a good example of legal dominance. The team in black goes straight forward. And the referee rewards them. Uncontested scrums. So if you're not 100% sure about this, please go through it and understand what the situation is, right? So the top row is reasons a team cannot provide a suitably trained front row player. So if the players are injured and they can't provide a suitably trained player, then they play it short, right? If a player's got a yellow card, and so this is just going to uncontested scrums, right? So the first one, They have to go to uncontested scrums through injury. They're going to play with 14. If there's a yellow card and they go to uncontested scrums, an additional player is going to leave the field. And the same goes for a red card, right? If a player goes off for blood, they play with 15. And if a front row player was injured due to foul play, they also play with 15 players still. Touch, lineup, and more. Quick throw. A lot of quick throws in the game at the moment. So always just be aware when the ball goes into touch. It's not an opportunity for you to relax. Know your laws and just be aware where the ball is at all times. So if there's a quick throw, you can make an immediate decision. I'm not going to go through all the laws. Line out, set up. Everyone's got to be in their position. Make sure you have a big gap. We want no delayed huddle. So if players approach the line out, they've got to keep moving towards the line out. If they're going to stop there and have a discussion first, you're going to blow your whistle and tell them to get into the line out. But we don't want them to stop all the time and have a conversation before they go to line out. Remember to manage it first. And if they're going to continue and ignore you, then you can free kick them. And if they can still do it, then you can escalate to a penalty. More formation. First of all, if a player is going to sack the jumper, they've got to land on the ground first, and they've got to immediately take them down. And then more formation to attack lifters must not obstruct defenders. So they can't come in front of the ball carrier. So they're between the ball carrier and the opposition. Right? They can only be on the side of the ball carrier, of the jumper. Of course, maul defense, no side entry, no collapse, no swimming. Remember, for mauls formed and it turns, there's no need to release. And I'll show you an example of that. So 2 things in this video. First of all, line out formation delay by the team in white. You'll see over here, they take a very long time to form the line out. If they're approaching the line out, they got to get in the line out. And then once whites has won the ball in the line out, they go forward, and you'll see that the opposition team coming from the side to stop that momentum because they've quite got a lot of momentum. 2 things. Line out formation delay. Let's have a look at the players standing here. There's no reason for them to be standing here. The line out's forming. We're waiting. It's a very long delay, and then they come in. So now you're going to see a play coming from the side, on our side, right there. The play in blue, number 3. The referee's playing advantage. 2 things. Line out formation without delay, maul defense side entry. Maul defense that's legal by the team in blue. You can see they never come around the maul, they never collapse the maul. They remain in their positions. They're not swimming up the side. The maul turns, and these players on the side, number 5, number 19, they were there all the time. And the referee blows a turnover. Maul attack, players must remain in the same lane, right? So what we don't want to see in the maul, when the maul's formed, the ball carrier or players in front of them actually detach and go out the side, right? I know oftentimes it's very, very close. But you've got to make sure that they, so if the maul moves, if the maul turns, like the blue team turned the maul and the green team had just carried on going forward, would be fine. But what we don't want is we don't want them, and it often happens when the team's going forward in the maul and then they get stopped. The moment they get stopped, they regroup, and then often they go around the side. They break away, and they have people in front of the ball carrier. It's a penalty kick. We had a lot of examples from it over the last 12 months. Here's an example of maul defense obstruction. There's quite a few things that happen here. First of all, these players over here don't even join the maul. All they do is put their arms, they join each other and block the opposition. And then the players here are just running behind them as well. So more than a lane change, this is just something very different. See the red team players on the outside, immediate obstruction, right? Foul play. Oh, doing good for time. Yeah, it's only 8:04. Safety is players are responsible for opponent's safety. So put the onus on players to play within law. Safety is main priority, right? And remember that you got to put the onus on players, right? So players have got to play within law. You know, you as a referee, you're there to referee the game, but put the onus on players. They got to play within law. You know, rather not debate, rather get it out of the game. Get it out of the game early. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process with foul play. First of all, you're going to blow your whistle. You want to separate teams and then collect as much information as possible. If you do have ARs, you consult with them. Also be aware if players are injured, make sure that they attended to, and also just note players' response. So you have a good idea of the temperaments of the game and what needs to be done moving forward. You don't need to rush or overreact. Just always make a confident and controlled decision. And really, really be honest with what you see. Do not make it up. And we always say, if you're not 100% sure, it's a mitigating factor. If you miss something, don't try and make up a call. So it can always be dealt with later. You know, it can be dealt later with the foul play process. So just make sure that when you make a decision, that it's something that you've seen and you're confident what happened, and you can make a decision. I think we've been very fortunate, especially over the last previous fall and spring, that we haven't had a lot of referees overreact, and we feel quite confident that the group of referees that, especially refereeing at a national level, are very good at not overreacting. Dangerous play was players should not engage in reckless or dangerous play. Dangerous tackling includes late tackling, high tackling in the air, no arms, unscrewed tackle. Also the chopping tackle, which I haven't seen in a while. Chopping tackles when the player plants with two arms on the ground, so that the ball carrier is hitting their shoulder and flipping over them. Right? I haven't seen a lot of that, but we don't want it to come back either. Ball carrier must not lead with their forearm into the neck or head area. So head and neck contact. First question is, was there foul play? Intentional, reckless, and or avoidable? And then the degree of danger. Was it direct or indirect contact? Was it high force or low force? And of course, if you do not have a TMO or replay to watch, you've got to make all these decisions in real time, you know, which we all realize is very, very difficult, you know. If you follow the process and, you know, hopefully it doesn't happen too often in your games when you have foul play. A good way to avoid a lot of this is to be very strict on foul play very early on, you know, with a high tackle, penalize to get out the game. Often with foul play, you don't necessarily want to play advantage. You just blow it, get out the game, you know. You can try and blow your P out of the whistle. So is there mitigation? So coming into tackle, there's sudden significant drop or change in height from the direction of the ball carrier, late change in dynamics. So maybe the player gets hit by another tackler and then makes contact with a player that might, you know, there might be some direct head contact or neck contact because there was another tackler involved. There was an effort to wrap or bind. They didn't really have any time to adjust, you know. That's a little bit more iffy. Passive tackler is feet planted, zero forward movement. They're just going backwards. Factors against mitigation. Oh, that was a bit quick. Apologies for that. Mitigation will, I don't know why it keeps going through. So mitigation will not apply if it was just a reckless effort, right? They had no consideration for the situation, right? So if it's just reckless or intentional, then there's no mitigation. And then if the player had a lot of time to make a decision, it's open space, there's not a lot of bodies moving around. It's also a factor against mitigation. The one thing I just want to bring up here in these tackles is that we're still seeing a lot of upright tackles. The player is not trying to go low. They're just upright making a tackle. They're putting themselves in a bad situation, right? So the upright tackle is definitely something we want to get out of the game. The sanction framework, direct high force, red card. Direct low force or indirect high force, yellow card. Indirect low force, a penalty kick. And again, we go back to, you have to be 100% sure to make the decision. But if it's already foul play, at a minimum, it's going to be a penalty kick. Hurdling, it's something that World Rugby eventually brought up. I know that they were still a little bit sort of neither here nor there about it. But what we want to make sure that we are not allowing is a player must not jump into or over a tackler. So if a tackler is going to tackle them and they jump over them, it's dangerous play and they will penalize them, even if they clear that player, as they do in this example. Right? So he hurdles the player, it's dangerous play, and it's a penalty, even though they didn't make contact, right? It's pretty straightforward to apply. Foul play obstruction. First of all, was a dummy runner in front of the ball carrier. They were never in a position to receive a pass, so they're already in front of the ball carrier. Did the dummy runner initiate contact with the defender? So say they were in a position to take the pass, but they then continue running and they initiate contact. They're running into a defender. What we want to see is they should either stop before they make contact with the defender or they should run into space. Should be pretty straightforward. The way that it helps referees to make better decisions in these obstruction situations is to do ball in line running. So when the ball comes out, ball in line running, the back line's moving forward and you slightly behind them, right? If you are in line with the whole back line running or the defenders, or you're running ahead, very difficult to see obstruction in the back line. I see, we see more and more sort of these very fancy running lines. We've got to make sure that we have a very straightforward approach to it and that we penalize it when it's needed. So if the defender could have legitimately made a play on the ball carrier, then it's a penalty kick. If not, it's play on. So if it's very far away, play on, right? Here the dummy runner initiates contact. Definitely be a penalty kick. See if I can just highlight the situation here. Looking at this player here, right? This is the player. See there? Runs in, initiates contact, the ball carrier runs around. We would hope that It's something that we can pick up as referees, especially when we're a little bit further behind or running ball in line. Foul play, deliberate knock, intentional knock on. It is not an intentional knock on if in the act of trying to catch the ball, the player knocks on, provided there's a reasonable expectation that the player could gain possession. I know previously we always said like they can at least sort of trying to catch the ball with two hands. It's very easy for you to say, if they're just reaching out, knocking the ball forward, should be easy call to make. So if there's a reasonable opportunity for them to catch the ball, it's a knock on. If not, it's a penalty kick for intentional knock. Then intentional knock where there was a potential line break, always a penalty kick and a yellow card. I'll say it again, intentional knock on where there was a potential line break, penalty kick and yellow card. And if there's intentional knock on where there's a probable try scenario, the penalty try and a yellow card. Again, running lines help you to make better decisions in the situation. Advantage. Now, remember we talked about setting your standards early. Smart advantage means you set clear standards from the outset. Use your opportunities to establish expectations. Don't go out there and look for penalties. Just go out there and look for opportunities where you can set the standards. And instead of playing advantage for everything, like you see a lot of international referees play advantage forever, they come back, especially early on the game, the players have forgotten what happened at the breakdown. So if you set your standards early, players understand what they can do. And as the game progresses, it'll reduce your penalty count especially as you get into the second half. And also sets a platform where players can play the best of their ability because they understand what is allowed and what is not allowed. Of course, always if there's a good opportunity for a team to score, lengthy advantages may be appropriate. And as many people think, play lots of advantage means more flow, more ball in play. But clear standards actually create an environment for flow. Clear standards and also not allowing players to slow down the game and waste time, right? And if you're playing a really good advantage, contributes to players trusting the process and exploring opportunities, right? So they know what the standards are. They know when you're playing advantage. They know why you're playing advantage, communicating it clearly. And then players might take that extra risk and explore more to gain an advantage. A couple of reminders. Really exciting. It's really exciting that we're making good time here. Remember the 50-22? So a couple of things here. If a player in their half kicks the ball indirectly, it bounces and goes into touch inside the opposition's 22-meter area, they get to throw the ball in. Now, unlike what a famous referee said the other day on a TV show, I think it was, or a podcast, if the ball bounces outside the 22 and then goes in the 22 and goes out, it still is a 50-22. They said it wasn't, right? As far as a line out on the halfway line, if a line out is on the halfway line, we're going to assume that they can still kick the ball, 50-22. And if a scrum is on the halfway line, right? But if the scrum moves over into the other half, then they can't do that anymore, right? The ball's gone over into the other half. So just set clear expectations for the players at rucks as well. Say it's in their half, same as you would say it's in their 22. Communication always helps. One player pre-latch, they may pre-latch the ball carrier and stay on their feet. One player. Flying wedge, more than one player, may not pre-latch on the ball, right? If there's a ball carrying two other players, that's illegal. Goal line dropout, we went through that earlier. Balls held up an in goal, kick and general play is made dead by defenders. Knock on an in goal, restart goes into in goal, is not immediately made dead by a defender. These are just reminders. Wasting time. So conversion, 90 seconds from when the try is scored. So as a referee, you can just make a point of taking note of the time, and maybe when there's like 10 seconds left and they haven't kicked it, maybe you want to remind them, tell them they've got 10 seconds, kick the ball, right? But don't say nothing and then just blow your whistle and tell them to go back, right? Just have a little bit of empathy, manage the situation. Penalty goal, 60 seconds from when they indicate the intention to kick at goal. We want teams ready to form the scrum within 30 seconds. Again, we don't want to be overly officious here, but we want to make sure that we manage it, and we manage it all the time. One thing that happens with scrums normally when there's an issue, and especially even after they're ready to form the scrum, that in a close game, the team that's ahead might do silly things to delay the scrum, right? Like they might on set stand up, or they might take the scrum down, etc. Just be aware of that. Make sure that players aren't wasting time, especially when they're ahead. Line out, teams form line out immediately. We talked about this earlier. We don't have to go through it again, right? Ask them to form the line out. Right, before the match, we also sent this out to a lot of the referees already. Try and arrive early, 1 to 1.5 hours before kickoff. Normally say more than an hour, but I think 1.5 hours is normally a really good time to arrive for the game. Introduce yourself to both coaches, and if the captains are there, to the captains as well. It's normally a good idea to ask the coaches, like, when would be a good time to do an equipment check within reason. And within reason means that you want to probably do it before the team's warm up, right? If coach says to you, oh, just before kickoff, you don't really want to do that, but just allow them to sort of have some control about when you want to do the equipment check, right? So you don't disrupt their warm up. So if you get there early, you have plenty of time to set it all up before the team's warm up. And then normally once you've done, make sure with subs that you got suitably trained front row players, and then your pre-match. So equipment check is normally a good time after that to do the pre-match. It's really just an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the team. So just think about the teams that have to come away from that feeling pretty confident that you're the referee today and that it's going to be okay. Please don't think it's an opportunity for you to start telling the players how they have to play the game, because they've been training for weeks and months and probably playing for years, and they're not going to change the tactics just because of what you say in the pre-match. So you'll go through the scrum engagement sequence, and then you talk to scrum off about ball in without delay, where the mark is for penalty kicks, where the mark would be for penalty kicks and free kicks. A great thing to always tell them at the pre-match is that the penalty is where the infringement occurred. The penalty is not where you as the referee would be standing, right? Because often you get players running straight at you to try and take a quick tap. You can say to them, it's where the infringement occurred, because very often we don't necessarily make the mark for the penalty or free kick, but we know where it is. So if the players are unsure, they can ask you, and you can point and say, the mark is over there, right? But don't allow them to run to you all the time, because they'll just do it all day long. You'll be in the way, and it just creates a really frenetic situation. And on most occasions, you as the referee, you're not even standing on the mark. And then you ask them if they have any questions, right? They might ask you if the ball's out, etc. Try and answer all the questions based on the guidelines that you already have. So captain meeting and coin toss. Once you've done both pre-match, it's normally a good idea to try and do the coin toss then. to establish what color or name you'll use for each team. I mean, I prefer using colors. You might not. Ask the captains to only talk to you at stoppages and not at penalty kicks or free kicks, because you don't want captains coming to you and trying to interfere when the opposition's trying to take a quick penalty, quick tap, right? And, you know, referee communicate through the captains, and players should communicate through the captain. A fun one: if assistant referees are not assigned, each team must provide touch judges. So please make sure that you have 2 flags that you can provide them. If the field has technical zones, that's great. You should use them. If not, each team should be between a 10-meter and 22-meter area, marked in red. You can see over here, this is preferably where we want them. I know that very often teams like to not be on the same side. It's a better idea for everybody to be on the same side, right? One half and the other half, either side of the halfway line. Concussion policy: there is no head injury assessment in any of the rugby that we're doing here, right? Community level rugby, there's no HIA. The player has a head injury and they go off, they're off for the rest of the game, right? The player shows symptoms of concussion before, during, or after a match, player must be removed from play immediately, not to return during the match. Any loss of consciousness requires removal of the player. There's no exception, right? Just remember, we don't have HIA. It's always safer when the player is injured, head injury, is that they do not play again in that game. This is the last section. And we want to take this section quite seriously because we do experience it at all levels of the game. And it is something that we need to address. And I know it can be very, very intimidating for referees. Referees of all levels can be very intimidated by referee abuse. So we've got a very clear process to follow here. And try not to just cop out and not deal with it, because it might escalate later, right? And remember, you as a referee, always try and take the high road in your style of communication. And I know it's difficult sometimes, but you have to be clear. You don't want to get into a situation where you're arguing with anybody. You just follow the process and keep it simple. So the first thing that we want to do, if there's referee abuse that you need to deal with, is for you to walk to the halfway line and the touch line to address the issue. And the reason why we want you to do this is because we don't want you to go off into dark corners having arguments or addressing somebody. You come to the halfway line and make them come to you, right? You would call the head coach over to the halfway line and instruct them to ask the identified person to refrain from the behavior. If the identified person is the head coach, then the referee addresses them directly, or you may ask the team captain to assist. Right? And you ask them once to refrain. On the second occasion, you will request the identified person to be removed from the grounds. So again, with this is like, you know, we're not talking about spectators, right? We're talking about people that are involved with the team. The zero tolerance approach should be applied. You know, on the second occasion, the identified person is to be removed from the grounds. The zero tolerance approach means that if the person refuses to leave, you should request the team captain to assist. And if failing compliance, you abandon the match and report it to us. Anyway, if you just address the issue and you have to restart the game, you don't restart the game with a penalty against the defending, against the person that you address against their team. Whatever happened last is how you're going to restart the game. Okay. You can't give red and yellow cards to people in the sidelines, coaches, water carriers, medical staff, etc. And remember, in all of these incidents, even with the warning incidents, please report it to us so that we are aware what's happened and we can see if there's a trend that follows that we need to address. So with that said, we are at 8:29. We are on the final minute of this webinar. Again, please just, if you have questions and that I wasn't able to look at your comments here, but feel free to address them to Jamie McGregor or myself, or to take, part of the referee development